Hello, welcome back to the Leading Yourself podcast. I am so excited about today's podcast episode. And I'm even more excited about last week because we hosted the Thrive 2021 Personal Growth and Leadership Virtual Conference. It was a completely free virtual conference for 2 days. This was my way to celebrate my milestone birthday and to kickstart a new decade doing what I'm most passionate about. One of the keynote speakers on the conference was Anthony Trucks. His story is so inspiring, and he shared a lot of amazing insights with all the participants of the conference around the topic of identity shift, which is also the name of his most recent book. Anthony grew up a Black adopted boy in a poor white family to beat the odds to become the man that he's today, a former NFL athlete. You might know him from the American Ninja Warrior. He's an international speaker who has been featured in Success, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and many more. Today, I want to share with you the conversation that I had with Anthony as part of the Thrive Conference. So get ready to get inspired and find tons of amazing practical advice on how you can upgrade how you operate so you can upgrade your life. Here with you, Anthony Trucks. Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast. This is your host, Carolina de Arriba. I'm an HR professional, health and fitness coach, wife, mom, and above all things, a goal-getter. In this podcast, we're going to be digging into all things leadership, professional and career development, habits, and relationships. This is a podcast for those who want to become the best version of themselves. Those who have big dreams and are willing to embrace the journey and put in the work to achieve them. My goal is to share with you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you in your journey. So let's dig into today's episode. Hello, welcome to day 2 of the Thrive Conference. Today, I'm so thrilled and honored to have Anthony Trucks himself today talking. Anthony, it's such a blessing. I'm so thankful for you to be here. I know that you just launched a book. I saw you were recently on a mastermind. I'm sure you have a lot of interviews and commitments, and the fact that you're making the time to be here, it means the world to me. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Very much so.
Good. So I purchased your book that just launched. Actually, should be arriving on my doorstep any minute, but I couldn't wait. So I listened to the audiobook in the last 48 hours. And I have to say that I love the book.
Thank you.
It's so well written. I love that you mix facts and science and research and your experience and the stories. And the one thing that I love is the analogies that you use in the book. I've heard a lot of interviews that you've been part of, and I know that most interviews start with share your story. And I want to be a little bit different since we only have 30 minutes, and I want to take the most advantage of the time.
Yeah.
Those who are watching and know you, they know your story, and those who don't, after this interview, I'm sure that they're going to go and follow you in social media and learn all about you because it's just amazing, your story.
Thank you.
But going back to the analogies, your new book, Identity Shift.
Yeah.
There's one analogy that you use throughout the entire book around our lives and identity. And you say in your book that we are a biological computer running a version of software. Mm-hmm. Can you explain the concept of identity, maybe using this analogy? I thought it was genius.
Yeah. Thank you. It was, so we have computers. We're on a computer now, and the computer has files, right? It's the audio file, the Microsoft Word file, not the folder, but the file. And then there's programs that make the files useful, right? So if I have this music, it's only useful if I can make Apple Music come on and play the song. If I have a PDF, it's only useful if I can have, the PDF viewer show it. And what happens is the programs and the computer it's all functional, but there's a piece that has to be running that we don't even notice. And if it's not operating, we can't see anything, hear anything, nothing. And that's the operating system. So I could have the screen and the keyboard, the hardware. I could have the file. I could even have the program. But if the operating system doesn't allow the program to play or it's not functioning, then everything just shuts down. And in fact, you have to upgrade the operating system sometimes to make the programs work well again. And in our lives, we sometimes have the same thing going on. Now, in the computer, when things get crazy, you get that spinning wheel of death, right? The computer freezes, it stops, and can't play the files, programs stop working. In our lives, we are the body is the computer, right? You also have a processor in the computer. The processor, you could hear getting all hot, like processor in our body is our brain, the actual ability for our brain to do what it does and process. The files is information we learn, books we've read, courses we took, people we meet, conversations. That's the files. The programs bring it to life. If I read a book on relationship, the program of relationships, program of health, program of wealth in our career, right? If I read a book on health, it's going to show up in what I do for my health, the program, right? The experiences, the programs are how we experience the computer overall. However, the operating system for us as humans is identity. It's not Windows, it's not Linux, it's not OS X. It's the identity of who we are. And if we want our programs to play the files properly, to be able to experience life amazingly, the operating system has to be upgraded so we can elevate how we operate to elevate our life. And if we don't upgrade that operating system, we can read the books, we can be in these programs or relationships, but I'll never be able to get the full out of them because I haven't upgraded my identity.
I thought it was genius. A lot of times people who are attending this conference, I probably have a lot in common that we are learners. We are goal getters. We set high goals for ourselves and we want more and we want to accomplish more, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that they get to a point where they get stuck and they can't take their lives to that next level, right? Take that leap step to achieving that level of dreams. And when I was reading the book, listening to the book and this analogy, I'm like, it all makes sense. This is the missing link, right? We take the courses, we set the goals, but identity is that missing link.
Yeah, it always is. And the funny thing is we're aware of it. We know we have an identity. Most people just assume that it's a arbitrary, floaty, it's just a thing, but it's actually concrete. It shows up every single day in our lives. And you'll read in the book, I talk about how your identity is who you are when you aren't thinking about who you are. And that person takes actions, takes inaction, doesn't do stuff, like they get scared. That's just who you're being. And that shows up in what we experience of life. And so if you find yourself like doing the work and you're stuck for a long time, it's usually not the information, because we have a whole lot of information. It's usually dialed into, and if you go back to it, it ends up being that we just, as a human being, we aren't the right person for our dream. Our identity doesn't match the dream. We see the dream, we can't experience it because we haven't matched the identity. So we feel this identity gap. When you close that gap, you get to experience that dream.
So talking about identity, I don't know if anyone has asked you this question, but from the perspective of identity, who are you? What is your identity?
That's a lot. Because no one knows, right? That's the thing. There's a good book by Michael Singer, and he talks about we are the watcher. Because if you say I'm Anthony, well, what if you break it down? Are you letter A and then N and then T and then H and O and Y all together, right? I'm a dad, so you're just a guy that produces other people. Like this, that's what it is. You're a person that produces other people. Now I'm a coach. So what does that mean? What do you like? There's no definitive. It's hard. You're a collection of all of it. Now, whatever that is, it exists in your brain in a very specific spot called the default mode network, the DMN. And so it comes on, but like it's hard to fully describe the entire person of who you are. However, when you look at someone like I see you, like I see Carolina, right? I understand that you're a human and who you are and how you show up. It's hard to describe it, but I do experience it every day. So if I was to describe who Anthony is from a standpoint of like not getting super deep, like I am an individual who's a collection of actions and experiences. I'm a being that's a collection of actions and experiences. I've done some things, I've experienced some things. And that in and of itself creates me in a way that I can't fully explain.
Talking about that, I said I was not going to ask you about your story, but you have an amazing story. And in your book, and every time that I've heard you speak, you talk about statistics and um, standards out there that you have beat in your life. Like if you would look at the statistics, I think there's two types of people in this world, right? There's the people that look at the statistics and the stereotypes and they let them define them, right? They think,
Yeah.
okay, if this is what the statistic says, that means that this is my destiny. This is who I am supposed to be, who I am. And then there's the type of people, which I think you are one of those. And I want to think that I'm one of them as well, that you look at the data and you're like, no, that's not me. That doesn't define me. And it kind of becomes like a personal challenge to beat that statistics. And you beat a lot of statistics.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that and how your identity, or how can you leverage your identity to take more of that second perspective to looking at those statistics and not letting them define you?
Yeah. Well, I think what it first boils down to is like the statistics we have in life and what they are. That's just someone looking at life, not really, saying it's a predictive tool. You can kind of predict based on human nature, but wherever you start, it does not determine where you end. I started in foster care. I was given away. I grew up in a really poor, different racial, family, and an all white family. So like none of that would tell you on paper that I would exist as I do, but I do. And so statistics in and of themselves have a place, but they're not definitive, right? It's the first part. The reason why I think a lot of them end up being predictable, and because like this holds true, is because most people are predictable in their assumption that they can't change their lives. Their assumptions that whatever they're experiencing, that they either deserve or this is as good as going to get. And so might as well settle for it. And then we tuck away. And then we maybe every once in a while, people will try things. I'll try to go do something new and I'll be met with the fact that I'm not good at that. And so I go, see, told you, and I stop. But they don't even realize that that is the first step to something new. It's to try it, not be good, but to choose to get better. And so for me, when I look at the identity aspect of who we are, like it's something that is malleable. It has been shaped. It already has been created. We've already done the thing you have to do. Just when you did it, you didn't have control of it. You didn't notice it and it was unintentional. So what people need to do nowadays is go, you know what, I'm going to intentionally focus on how I shift my identity. And in doing that, you start changing your life with purpose and in the direction you actually choose.
What would you say has been the most significant identity shift that you've made? I know, you're constantly having to shift your identity, right? It's a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah.
It's not like I shift and I've arrived at that identity, but life takes you through a journey and you need to continue to shift. But if you can recollect one that you say this has been the most significant or impactful in your life, what
Yeah.
would that be?
There's a lot, man. I would probably go and say the most impactful for me was probably the shift when I was like 2016. I was probably like 29, 28, 29. I like, oh, no, I bet I'm like 30. It was like 30, 31. And it was because at that time I was in a space where I wasn't like really happy with my life, who I was, how I was living things. It wasn't becoming, I wasn't a good dad. I wasn't a good husband. I wasn't anything that I would deem of great character I want the rest of the world to mimic. And so it's at that moment I was like, I don't like this guy. Let me do something. It was the first time I proactively tried to improve my life, but not by learning more, because I'd already learned a bunch, right? Like I'd already gone through the gamut of like consuming. And I think we think the more we know, the better we do. And it's not. You can't consume. It's like we get to this point of not realizing that we can have too much information and no action and be in a bad place. So I finally was like, I'm going to start applying what I know. And that was the game changer.
I know you close your book. I'm going to give a teaser for those who will be reading the book, but you close the book. And I love this quote that you use saying, it's not what you know, is who you are with what you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we say is what you do, what you know, but it really is who you become with what you know.
Well, because if you think about it, you'll say, okay, well, it's what you do with what you know. Oh, yeah, obviously. But who does the doing? Right. You do the doing, right? So if you do it and you hate it, you won't do it very long. If you do it and it's not who you see yourself to be, you won't do it again. But if you do it because it's who you are and it's easy and it feels normal, it'll get done. And then all of a sudden that success comes to you. So there's a point in time when it's not your identity, it feels hard to do it. When it is your identity, it feels hard not to do it. And that's the difference. Can I do this thing that is hard for most people in a way to where like, I can't not do it. It's just who I am. And now we get to a beautiful new space.
In your book, you talk a little bit about habits. I'm a huge fan of habits, like Atomic Habits. Is one of my favorite books. That's actually the book where I heard the term identity for the first time.
Oh yeah, it's a good book.
And it's a pity that it doesn't focus as much on identity. So when I read your book, I'm like, this really is like the missing link. But can you speak a little bit on what role do habits play in making those shifts happen?
Yeah, it's a huge piece of it, right? Because you are what you consistently do. That's the thing. And when you're doing things, the goal is to get to the point where you do them so consistently that it becomes who you are to do it. It's to where you wouldn't be able to go to bed at night till it gets done. And that's a habit. That's a flow. It's a piece. We actually find comfort in certain habits. There's, like when things happen, we will find comfort in doing certain things that most people would never do. And so it's kind of that thing where you got to start anchoring down to the habits of it all, but choosing the right habits. Most people just borrow habits because they see somebody else do it and go, oh, I should probably do that. And then they get to the back end, they never realize like I was doing the wrong things the whole time. Like I was just doing things because I thought I had to do things. And next thing you know, like I shouldn't have been doing these things, right? Because you didn't plan out the identity you wanted to become that was doing the things that would give you what you wanted to have. When you do it in that manner and you say, who do I want to be? Then that person does certain things, which is why that person has certain things. That's the process people need to think through more than just this randomness. And that doing is the habits.
I feel that's so powerful. Like a lot of times, especially in this times with social media, we see people doing things and they talk about their morning routines and what they're doing to be successful. And we think that if we just mimic what they do, we're going to get the same results that they do. But we really don't know what goes behind what we're seeing in social media. And like you said, a lot of times we pick a habit and it's so hard. And at the beginning, everything is hard, right? You need to stay consistent to see that result coming through. Yeah. But a lot of times there's a conflict with who we are or who we want to be or become. That's why either the habit doesn't stick or we don't see the results that we thought we would get by doing the things that we see other people doing.
Yeah, because we almost just stop doing it after a while. It's like, this sucks, or I don't get the quick return. And that quick return is what most people desire. I found that there's a process and a path that we go through. And that process essentially runs through this journey of like, I am bad at this and it hurts a lot to do it because I know that I'm bad at it. And it emotionally hurts a lot. And I go, I'm done with this. And I walk away. And the person who's going to find success one day goes, yeah, it hurt. It was a 10 out of 10 of pain. It was really high. But you know what? I learned something. I'm going to go try it again. They go, oh, it's 9.5 this time. Still hurts a lot. Still, it's 9.5 out of 10. But you do it again. It's like 9 of pain. And people go, are you crazy? Are you trying to hurt yourself? What are you doing? I got to keep going. You keep on going. People are like, you're an idiot. Why are you still going? But it's an 8.5 of pain. And they keep going and going and going. And like, this person is psycho. Why are they doing this? And all of a sudden it gets to 0. And most people assume that 0 means painless. Like, oh, I can do it and there's no pain. But it actually turns into joy. It's because you've gone through, it's joy and it's who you are now to do that. Like, you've gone through this, you've invested so much that there's no way that this is not who you are. I love doing this. I used to hate speaking on stages. Now I'm like, I love it. Put me on. Like, I'm gonna have a blast doing it. Like, the thought of getting up there kind of scared me. But now I'm like, that's why I love to be in doing these things, right? Podcasts. The first few podcasts, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be, I don't know if I should do podcasts. Now I'm like, let's do them all day long, right? So the idea is like, you have to lean in and do things poorly with the intention of learning to reapply to where you get to the point of having joy. And now it's who you are. I'm a guy that's like, I'm a great guest. I'm a podcaster. I got it, right? That's who I can identify as that now, but only because I went through the crappy stages.
talking about, so this conference is all about personal growth and leadership. From your perspective, what is the connection between identity and personal growth?
It's the same thing. I mean, you are the person, and growth is you attach it to the thing that's doing, right. It's a form of a verb. And so with an identity shift, it is a version of growth. It is because you're going up. Growth usually is an expansion. It's a moving in a direction, right? When something grows, the cells duplicate, it grows, it expands. And an identity shift is an expansion. It's just into a new version of your identity, not a different you. You're not changing yourself, but you're a new expansion of your current identity. And so within that, that's a person and it's growth. So therefore it's in the same wheelhouse.
So I'm sure as people are watching right now, they're thinking the $1 million question is, how do you make that shift happen? And
Yeah.
let me say, I recommend you get the copy of the book. I'm going to put the link down below. It's on your workbooks as well. Totally worth it, because Anthony walks through his full shift methodology in the book that will guide you like step by step how to do that. But if someone hasn't read the book, hasn't listened to you before, and they're fired up to say, yes, I want to make this shift happen, what is one thing that someone can do like today to start making that shift?
It's going to be prepared to have your ego poked. Because we get this anticipation of like, I want to do the work to get the thing. And then whenever we start being faced with the work, we get faced with who we are, and it's scary. It's like, oh, I'm not the person that do that, or oh, it's going to be hard. We get faced with it. And it's in those moments that most people will put their ego up and make a good excuse to walk away or to justify or make whatever excuse they want that makes them not have to face this, even though you were just excited. So I recommend to people is when you prepare down this path, really get to the point of understanding you're going to be met with something that I call an identity wall. And that wall is a big, tall thing for a lot of people that they can never climb, and they go looking for the door. It's not a door thing. It's a climb thing. It's effort. It's energy, right? You got to climb the wall. And if you can be the person that climbs the wall, you'll get there, but you got to be prepared before you get there. Because if I don't tell you this, you're going to show up with no rope and no hook. You can't hook it, latch it, and pull up. But if I tell you this, you go, okay, great. I'm going forward, but I'm going forward knowing that at some point I'm going to hit a wall that I'm going to have to climb.
Now let's say that someone follows your shift method. They're put all the work in making this shift.
Yeah.
Because identity is something that you can see, right? Is there, but you can't really see it, touch it, feel it. How do you know if you have succeeded in making that identity shift?
Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, there is a method. It's in the book, and that method is really the steps you do. You go through the steps, which is there, and that's what we use every day with clients. When you know, it's because what you'll do is you'll wake up a day, and I don't know when that day will happen, but you'll wake up one day, and you'll realize that you are not thinking the way you used to. You don't feel the way you used to. You might not even have the same job or friends that you used to, and you'll feel like the other person is a different stranger to who you are now. Like the person that I used to be when I would, go to work and then, come back in the afternoon and drink like a 6-pack of beers and then go back to my gym. I owned a gym. Like I'm not that guy. It's like he seemed like a distant stranger to me. So when you feel like that old you is a stranger, that's when you've actually made the shift.
There is one question that I ask everyone when I have them in the podcast. I'm always looking for great book recommendations. And if I ask you, what is the one book that has influenced your life the most, what would that be?
There's 2 books. One was early on. It was called Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a great book.
That's mine. When people ask me, that is the book that has impacted my life the most.
It's a good starter book. It just, for some reason, was a really good book to start with to understand. And then after that, one of the best books I've recently read is called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Really good book. Really enjoyed it. It's a conversation with the devil in a really weird way that it'll trigger you, man. It makes you think way differently than you do now.
Thank you for that. I'm as I said, I'm always looking for the great next read. Of course, now it's Identity Shift. Really
Thank you.
recommend it to everyone. Will definitely be on my top 3 books that I've read this year by
Thank you.
far. Like,
I
it's
appreciate it.
really tactical advice. Is It's putting away, that you can understand, you can relate. Again, I really love that it's not only based on your experience, but your research and science and facts. And then as I said, I love the analogies that you use in the book. Like, it was hard to pick one to say, this is the one that resonated the most, because they all did.
Mm.
One last question. I know we're running out of time. In the book, you talked about the 3 steps in the shift method, and the last one of sustaining, which I think might seem like the easiest, but I think is the hardest, because is the one that, at the beginning you put all the work, you're motivated, and then you feel that, okay, I'm here now, I'm done. But if you don't sustain that, either you can revert or you can become a different identity if you're not intentional about what identity you want to adopt. What are the things that you do on a daily basis that help you reinforce that identity and helps
Mm.
you continue to be open to identify future shifts that you need to do in your identity?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a computer. If you go back to that, the first part of it is like I'm always living my life and I'm aware of living life. And in doing so, you get met with different things that you didn't expect. And you just have to be present with them. Right. And I also do things that keep me in line with who I see myself to be. So if I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to own up to what it is. And I want to live in line with who I say I am. So I have integrity. But then your life is going to give, like a computer gives you little alerts that says, oh, bing, update your computer. And, you're like snooze, whatever. That's life too. People will say, hey, you're kind of getting a little bit out of shape, or hey, you're being a little bit rude right now. Like, and we can snooze it all day long, but then the computer will crash. We'll have problems in our relationship, problems in our health. It'll all just be weird and out of whack. So the idea is, if you can be aware that's going to go on, and when people tell you stuff, that you take it in and update it, that's when your life starts adjusting and you can stay consistently in line with your current identity, but also always elevating and upgrading your operating system.
Awesome. Well, Anthony, I want to be very respectful of your time. I know you have a very tight agenda. I just want to say thank you again. I am turning 40, which is a big number. And my plan to how to celebrate my birthday was my parents. I'm originally from Spain, and they were leaving Spain, and they were going to come, and we were going to all celebrate together.
Yeah.
And with COVID, that is not possible.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, how do I want to celebrate my birthday? And I start to look at purchasing like a ticket to a virtual conference or something like that. And I said, well, how about I do my own? And when I
Your
thought
own, yeah.
about who I wanted to be part of this project, your name immediately came to mind. So once again, thank you so much for making the time to be here and talking to me.
Very welcome. Happy to.